Hello and welcome back to the Cartoonist Studio, and this week it's Happy St. Patrick's Day, although actually that was last week, but because of the fact that I'm a fortnightly I missed it, so I'm celebrating it now. Why am I celebrating it? Well, my granddad came from a little village called Sallynoggin just outside Dublin. My dad says he was born over there, so that makes him Irish, so I guess that makes me half Irish. And throughout my childhood, there's been a huge Irish influence in our culture and God knows what else. So my granddad was the big Irish influence. And so today, in homage to him and St. Patrick, I'm going to be doing a caricature of the owl fella. And if I had thought about it, I'd have done the whole thing in an Irish accent, but I didn't get around to it. I completely forgot, so I'll do a little bit of the introduction. So I will. Right, so without further ado, it should be a fairly quick video this week. Just me drawing, talking about my granddad, and yeah, producing a caricature. Something I do a lot of, but very seldom do on here. So there we have it, caricature being produced. If you like that kind of thing and the other kind of drivel I produce, then usual thing, like, hit the like button, subscribe. If you want, if you're one of these people who watches it but don't subscribe, hit the subscribe button. It means that the channel grows. If it stays static, I'll think, well, no one wants to watch it, so why should I bother? But if you like it, subscribe. Those numbers go up. I keep doing it. I keep producing the rubbish that I produce. And you keep getting it. But hit the notification bell and it'll be a drop-down menu and there's a bell there that says all. Hit that and you get notification every time I produce something. Sometimes even if I think of producing it. So that'll be good, won't it? Right, let's go either that way or this way or some way, and let's see me drawing himself. Hello, here we go. Right, okay, so it's my granddad himself, as he would always refer to, because he's Irish and they refer to themselves as himself said this and himself. Little phrase they use. Now, he, as I mentioned in the introduction, came from what was then a little village called Sallynoggin, which I think is just a great sounding name. I think it was like a row of houses or 2 rows of houses, I think it was, and a pub. Of course, had to have a pub. And yeah, that was it. But this is where he hailed from, and he told me many a tale, did Grandad, about his life growing up there. If any of you have ever seen the film Angela's Ashes, that was my grandfather's era. He was brought up around about then. He used to tell stories about he said he wasn't 14 years old before he got his first pair of shoes. No, first shoe, sorry, not pair of shoes, his first shoe. I don't know whether he found him in the street or with a one-legged person. I don't know what the hell it was, but he told tale about how poor his life was, and it wasn't until he's 14 before he had his first shoe. And then he got the second one when he got a job at the golf links, as he used to call it, which is, I think it is him and a couple of friends. They had a job collecting balls and cleaning them and giving them back to the players. And then after a while, I think they took pity on him and they gave him another shoe. Not the same sort as the one he had, but a different shoe. And so he had two shoes then. One was completely uneven and opposite. They weren't the same. Yeah, my granddad. But anyway, he was what my dad used to refer to as a professional Irishman. Now, a professional Irishman is someone who becomes Irish when it suits them. Now, back in the time that my granddad was alive, there was a lot of Irish jokes around. Now, these, I'll get this right now, these consisted of, the Irish were always seen as a little bit thick, a little bit daft. And it's all done in a sort of best. I mean, the English were seen as snobs, the Scottish were seen as tight-fisted, and the Welsh, well, they didn't really factor very much, to be honest with you. I think they're sort of lovers of livestock, mainly sheep. That was what they were. So all these jokes would come out, the English, Irishman, Scotsman, that sort of stuff, and the joke would come from it. Now, he loved these jokes. In fact, he knew more Irishman jokes than most of the comedians did. He was never offended by it, because he saw them for what they were, just light-hearted japes. Now, but he was a very intelligent man. There was nothing daft about my granddad. Very intelligent man. And he used to play the part of the dumb Irishman when it suited him. And one classic point in case was, like all Irishmen, he used to enjoy a drink and a bit of a gamble. And he'd been out the one day, and I think he'd done quite well on the horses. He'd had a win. So he'd gone straight round the pub to celebrate his win. And after he'd come out, he was thinking to himself in his drunken cups, it's Lynn's birthday. Now, Lynn was my nan. It's Lynn's birthday. I know what I'll do. I'll go and buy her some of that Chanel No. 5. She loves the stuff. She thinks it's beautiful. Now, Chanel No. 5, I think it's still around. But at the time, it was a very popular perfume and very expensive. But he'd had a win, and nothing's too good for Lynn so far as he was concerned. So off he went, popped himself off round the nearest Boots the chemist, and he went in there, and there was a girl. He said, "Hello there, good morning, how the devil are you?" And she said, "I'm fine, thank you, how can I help you?" He said, "Well, it's Lynn's birthday tomorrow," like she knew who Lynn was. And she said, "Oh yes," and she's taken a fancy to that Chanel No. 5. Now, I know it's expensive stuff, but do you have any? She said, "Oh yes, we do. He said, "Well, can I have a look at it?" So anyway, she shot off, and she came back with this little bottle of Chanel No. 5. And my granddad said, "That's the stuff, that's grand." He said, "And how much is that?" And she told him, and this was all back in the early 1970s, and I think it was about £15 a bottle then. I mean, that would be the equivalent of about 70, 80 quid or something. So he said, "Oh, it's a lovely bottle. It's the Chanel No. 5. It's and it's £15." Granddad nearly fell off the stool. And this is where the professional Irishman came in, because he then said, "Jesus, that's awful expensive." He said, "How much is a bottle of Chanel No. 4? And that's how he would be a professional Irishman. Many tales about him, but mainly, I suppose, my experiences with him was he was a fantastic grandfather. I mean, no child could ever have asked for anything more. He was so supportive. I'd no idea that he was this bruising 6'6", was he? I think 6'4", I think he was. Irishman. He was very tall. I mean, particularly considering he was brought up in such poverty, to be so tall was quite something. And but he came over to the UK in a time when they sort of talk about racism now, but there was tremendous racism towards the Irish. You'd see flats and apartments, and they sort of say no dogs and no Irish. Completely unacceptable behaviour. But this was normal. Grandad just accepted this. But he was a stonemason by trade, which is it's a good job. It's a hell of a good job. But when he came over here, they didn't want to give him, an Irishman, such a highly skilled job. So he got a job as a brickie. Just, laying rows and rows and rows of bricks. Him and his mate, Pat Malloy, great Irish name. And that's what he did for the rest of his life. He laid brickworks, built bridges, worked on housing estates. His his work is all over Birmingham, where I was brought up. And yeah, but anyway, I say he was a great granddad. He was a fantastic guy, and he was very supportive of anything I did. If I wanted to be a footballer, he'd sit and watch all the football with me. If I wanted to be a cowboy, he'd run around the back garden pretending to be an Indian, and he was just wonderful. And so many fond memories of him. But when I decided I wanted to be a cartoonist, he went out and started buying the Daily Mirror, which at the time, it's a British newspaper, which at the time had the most cartoons in it, and this is why he got it. And he would clip out all the cartoons all week, and then on Sunday, when we came round to see them, the family came out to see them, he'd have them all on the table. He'd say, "Come in here, son, come in. I've got the cartoons out now, we'll have a look at them." Now, he knew nothing about cartoons, nothing at all, but because it mattered to me, he learned. And he had so many, after a short period of time, he was so insightful into the cartoons that there's still things now that I do that I could attribute to my granddad's wisdom. And like I say, he knew nothing about cartoons, but he learned, he studied them because it mattered to me. And that and many other reasons are some of the reasons why I miss him so much. He went in 1981, and there's still not a day goes by that I don't think about him. So when you think about St. Patrick's Day and the Great Irish, him, Bob Dixon, all-time great Irishman. Right, okay, so that's the penciling. I suppose we'll go away and ink it now. It's going to be hopefully quite a much shorter video. Should I do a bit more here? He's running because in those days he got paid, I think it was by the brick, I think it was by the yard or the row or something like that, and he became very quick at laying bricks so as he could get more money, feed his family. Okay, so we'll square in there. Yes, we'll put a square in there because he probably had one of those as well. A little plumb line. If you don't know what a plumb line is, go and look it up. All builders used to have them. They're little metal bullets on a string, and they'd hang it down. It dangle down, but it would lay straight because of the weight on the string, and that's how you knew that your line was plumb. It's a plumb from the plumb line. There you go. A little bit more information. And holding his shoe. Yeah. Right. Let's ink it, and I shall see you in a few minutes. Okay, we're back. Let's get going on with the caricature. I do a lot of caricatures, but this one's just a labour of love. I haven't drawn him for quite a while, actually. The owl fella. That's another thing, you see. He'd have a lot of Irishisms in the things that he'd say. And I remember my dad telling me a tale once that he was speaking to his father, and his father had recently become the oldest member of the family, the oldest male member of the family. Oh, someone must have died or somewhere along the line. And he said to my dad, he said, "I'd like you to start referring to me as the Owl Aegis." You've heard me say it a few times on here, like an Owl Aegis. And my dad couldn't. He thought it was a huge insult to call his father an idiot. But he didn't realise that in Ireland, at that particular time, I'm not sure whether it's the same now. I wouldn't go over there and start calling them all Owl Aegis, because you might get a little thump off them. But in those days, certainly, it was seen as like an honorary name, because he was, he's like the oldest member of the family, and people would always sort of say, "And how's the Owl Aegis today?" "Ah, he's doing fine. Himself's okay." And so it was a big thing. My dad could never bring himself to do it, and it was really upset. He was telling me one day, he said, "I really feel bad now because he didn't ask for much." Did the old man? He said, "But he asked me to call him that, and I wouldn't do it." He said his little face was crestfallen, and you realise that he wasn't going to get called it. So my dad told me this when he became the Owl Aegis. He was the oldest member of the family, the oldest male member of the family, and he asked me if I would call him the Owl Aegis, and I said, "Yeah, no problem." I didn't have a problem with that because he was an Owl Aegis. And So yeah, he actually, my dad's not really very technical. He's a brilliant mind. I mean, he's such an intelligent man. But for some reason, computers just absolutely stymied him. He could not get on with them. But at some point in one of his resurrections, in an attempt at the computer to become computer literate, shall we say, he asked me to set up an email account for him. And his email is thealdegyot@gmail.com. I think it's brilliant. I was amazed it wasn't taken, but it wasn't. He's got it. I mean, don't bother emailing him. He won't answer it. He's bloody useless. He sends an email and then runs off in case someone answers him. That's literally what he does. He's terrified of them. But yeah, so there you go. The Aldegyot. Lovely old fella. Another tale of my granddad. Like I said, he worked on a building site. All of his working life over here in the UK. And in the summer holidays, like most families, my parents had to go to work whilst we were on school holidays. My grandparents were retired or semi-retired, so we go and spend a bit of time with them. And one day it was summer, glorious summer. I can remember it being so hot, and my granddad had a Ford Zephyr, lovely car, big old thing, and he had to go and get his wages. So he said, do you want to come along with him? So me and my sister got in the car. We went along. Now he was a great singer, was my granddad. He suddenly burst into song, and he was singing. I don't know who it was who recorded it, but it was a song called Spanish Eyes, and he loved this song. And he was singing lustily. So it was a lovely hot day outside, and we were stuck to the leather seats because we all had shorts on. My sister probably had a little dress or skirt of some sort, and we were going along. So I always remember it for that reason. Anyway, we get to the building site, and we must have got there around about either lunchtime or some break time, because they were all in the builder's hut. And my granddad walked in, and we were tiny. I mean, he was so big anyway, but we were tiny. We couldn't have been any more than sort of 4 or 5 or something. And so we're holding his hand, and our hands are right up in the air, and he's sort of bending down to hold our hands. And he walks in, and he did the first thing that all Irishmen of his generation did in those days. He walked to the doorway and said, "God bless all here." And they said, "Hello, Bob." And he said, "Right, now, before I start," he said, "we'll have no bad language. We'll have no fighting. And we'll have no disgusting behaviour. Do you understand me?" And the builder said, "Yeah, all right, Bob." He said, "I wasn't talking to you." And he pointed at us and said, "I'm talking to them too." God bless him. Always there, ready with a laugh and just to entertain people. Right. This is coming along quite quickly today, isn't it? Is it? Yes, it is. Oh, I thought you'd like it. Have you liked and subscribed? Have you told everyone about me? Not the authorities, obviously. So yes, it was St. Patrick's Day. Now this year, hopefully, I've never done it yet. I've wanted to every damn year. I wanted to do this, but this year I am going to go to Ireland, pay homage to the Aldegyot, go to his house, because Sallynoggin has now just been incorporated into Dublin. It's like part of Greater Dublin now. But yeah, I have to go there. I've got to go there and raise a glass and say, "Sláinte, Bob Dixon." Sláinte is just an Irish salutation. Whenever you have a drink, like you say cheers or all the best. Theirs was Sláinte. Oh, another little tale about my granddad. This one I've only recently found out. Now, I'm going to say what it is first. He was a Shanachie. Now, please excuse me, all the Irish out there, if I have mispronounced it. But a Shanachie is like a storyteller, travelling storyteller. and he was one at the age of 15 or 16. And what they would do is they would travel between villages, telling stories, passing on the news. Shanachie was a very important person, and if he visited a village, he was put up at the big house, usually the farmer's house. You'll come and stay with me, and that's where they'd stay. And then they'd tell stories to the children, and then when the children went to bed, they'd stay around the sort of fireplace, and everyone from the village would come round to the big man's house, and the Shanachie would then inform them about everything else that had been going on in the other villages, because they seldom saw anything outside of maybe one, if you're lucky, 2 villages away. The only time they ever went to the big city, which ever their nearest big city was, and that was very rare, if at all. So they were very insular people in those days. So you can imagine the Shanachie, why the Shanachie was so important, why he was so relevant. And he did this. It was always his dream to travel. He loved. Ideally, he would have wanted to have been a tramp, believe it or not. He was very romantic about things. He didn't really understand the principles behind it or the logistics, but he liked the idea of travelling, so he thought, a tramp's an ideal thing, I'll become a tramp. So he did the next best thing. He became this Shanachie. And I never knew this, like I say, I never knew this until recently. And he told, who told me? I can't think it was who told me. But it made perfect sense, because I spent a lifetime of listening to his stories. He'd come over on a Wednesday night, and we wouldn't go to bed until Grandad had arrived. And he'd take us upstairs and he'd tell us a story. And my mum and dad and my nan used to sit at the bottom of the stairs listening to him telling these tales. Usually start off with something like, have I ever told you the one about old Mama Cafferty? And he probably had, but when he told it again, it was a different story. Every time it was a different story. And I didn't realise that he'd literally sit at the end of the bed and he'd think, what am I going to tell him? And he'd start to just invent one, come from the top of his head. He was a great storyteller. And his stories were full of either horror or action or humour or all sorts. He was just brilliant. So you can understand why he would have been a good Shanachie if he'd have chosen that life. But my great-grandmother needed money, and in those days that's what you did. You went out and you looked after your family. So he went to England to work in the building trade, which what most of the Irish did. They either went to America or they came over to England. And so that's what he did. And he met my nan there, settled and stayed there the rest of his life. So he was a Shanachie, a stonemason, best granddad in the world, ever, and a professional Irishman. Plus a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, he did so many things. So many things. Okay, well, I'm going to finish this little picture off now. I don't know whether you've heard it, by the way, but in the background we've got a little bit of Irish music, or a little bit of Celtic or Gaelic type music. It'll be playing gently in the background, but it's there. Don't normally do it, but I thought, well, it's St. Patrick's. Let's have a little bit of a jig, shall we? Because I wanted to play some particular. He loved the Chieftains, and I wanted to play a particular song. Well, YouTube won't allow that. There's copyright issues and what have you, and they just won't let you play it without sort of taking. If this video at any point becomes popular and it gets to a stage of being monetized, I wouldn't get a penny. YouTube would just take it away from me. So there's no point doing it. But some of the stuff they give you for free has a kind of a definite Irish flair to it, or what I would think is an Irish flair. So that's it. That's the music. Hope you enjoyed it. Right, that's pretty much it. All that's left for me to do now is to say I hope you have been dinging that bell so loud. Everyone's coming in for their dinner, and you'll come back next week when I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a clue. Sherlock Holmes has gone out of copyright. He's now in the public domain, and I have celebrated that. So it's something to do with Sherlock Holmes, but what? Oh, I don't know. You'll find out next week in the next exciting instalment of The Old Egypt Picks Up a Pen. Yeah. Well, so come back for that. That'll be fun. And sorry it's a short one, but it has been very, very busy. Something majorly horrific has happened in my life. I don't really want to talk about it just yet, but in the next few weeks I will be doing a video and it will all be explained. But up until that point, in the meantime, sign this little bugger. This is Bob Dixon, my granddad, a great granddad. Sláinte Bob, and happy St. Patrick's Day, or belated St. Patrick's Day. And a happy St. Patrick's and belated St. Patrick's Day to you all. I hope you had a great day. And I'll see you next week. No, not next week. The week after. Okay? You coming? Is it in your diary? Brilliant. See you then.